This right here is the Mercedes C-Class facelift. It's just been launched at a price of 40 to 48.5 lakh rupees. Now, there are no petrol engines at launch, but a diesel engine in 2 states of tune. A brand new 2-litre BS6 compliant diesel at that. You get it in C300d, and this one I'm driving right here is the C300d AMG line. Now, Renuka has driven this car in Europe just a few months ago, and she gave you a detailed review of it then. So what I'm going to do today is tell you what it's like in India spec. But before we go any further, be sure to like, subscribe and click the bell icon and tell us in the comments what you think about the facelifted C-Class. The updated C-Class's exterior follows the classic facelift template. New headlamps, tail lamps, bumpers and wheels, but for this C300d there's a difference. Unlike the C250d that it replaces, they've done a bit more to set this one apart from the lesser C220d. It gets the AMG line body kit, which means really aggressive bumpers at the front and rear, and the diamond grille which you previously got only on the AMG C43. It also gets higher spec multi-beam LED headlamps, which look a bit different too. You also get larger 18-inch wheels on the C300d AMG line, but frankly, though they are aggressive, their design makes them look smaller than they actually are. The changes to the interior are similarly subtle at first. So what is the Indian spec C-Class like on the inside? Well, I have to say they've done a really good job about making you feel like you're in a luxury car. For one, they've replaced the glossy wood which was quite prone to scratching with this nice open pore wood which is finished in a really nice dark color in this C300d AMG line. Other AMG line bits include this steering wheel which is nice and chunky and has a flat bottom, and you also get quite a wide array of adjustment for the driver and passenger seat and memory function for both as well. I also like this shade of tan leather, again exclusive only to the C300d AMG line. The biggest change to the interior, however, and the most welcome one in my eyes, is this new 10.25-inch central screen, which is standard across all models. Where the old screen felt a bit too small and like a bit of an afterthought, this one feels really well integrated, and it's widescreen as per the new Mercedes format. It's really crisp and it looks really nice. It also has the latest version of Mercedes Command infotainment system. Sadly, we do not get the new digital dials that debuted in Europe. We still get analog dials for this car. They look quite smart and a nice hooded binnacle surrounds them, but it's missing that last degree of tech finesse that you get in some rivals. In fact, the updated C-Class is rather well equipped, especially this C300d, and the infotainment system finally feels right up there with the best. So this 300d in effect replaces the 250d, the more powerful diesel engine in the C-Class range. You get the same 500 Newton meters of torque, which is really quite significant for a 4-cylinder engine. But now power is up from 204 horsepower to 245 horsepower. And it's not just any old 4-cylinder. This engine in both the C220d and this C300d is the new 2-litre OM654. Yes, the same one that debuted in the E-Class. However, here in the C-Class, it is a BS6 compliant engine. That's right, even on today's BS4 fuel, it can run to BS6 emission standards. Like the facelifted S-Class, which has a BS6 compliant 6-cylinder engine, this one uses a host of technology, a diesel particulate filter, selective catalytic reduction unit and AdBlue supplements to allow the car to run at BS6 emissions levels even today. But don't worry, that doesn't affect the way it drives at all. So how does this engine drive? Well, for one, it's incredibly punchy off the line, although that may also have a little bit to do with Merc's incredible 9G-tronic 9-speed automatic gearbox. It's also a fair deal more refined than its 2.1-litre predecessor. However, I still think it might fall a little bit short of the high bar set by the Audi A4. Below 2000 RPM, like right now, it's really nice and silent, but once you extend it beyond that, it can get a little bit boomy. but man, the power on this car. Put your foot down and within no time, it just starts flying. Now we don't have our testing equipment with us today, but Merc claims a 5.9 second 0 to 100 time, and quite frankly I believe them. This is a really quick car, both off the line and in kick-down acceleration. Particularly in Sport Plus mode, acceleration is just manic. And this is a 4-cylinder diesel, let me remind you. Now Renault did drive the C300d in Europe, but it had a completely different chassis setup. For one, it had adaptive air suspension at all 4 corners. This one's on passive steel springs. And to top it off, it was 4-wheel drive, and that means it affected the steering dynamics quite a bit. So what's the Indian spec car like? Well, it's got passive dampers and rear wheel drive only, and that means the handling feels a lot more uncorrupted. That really sharp turn-in from the previous C-Class returns, and that's a welcome part of this car's dynamics. And body control is pretty good as well. What does seem to have improved a bit is the ride quality. Now we did criticize the previous C-Class of being sprung a little bit too firm, and yes, this one is a little bit firm as well, but there is a little bit more suppleness built into the suspension this time. And mind you, this one is riding on 18-inch wheels as opposed to the 17s of the standard car. You feel the 18-inch wheels when you go over a sharp bump, and you feel them thud inside the cabin. But overall, the ride does seem to have improved, if only slightly, and perhaps is not quite as soft as some of its rivals, but it's a step in the right direction.
The C-Class facelift on the surface then is what you'd expect from any facelift. New bumpers, wheels, head and tail lamps, some equipment revisions and a spruced up cabin. It's only once you start driving that you start to appreciate what it's really about. The new engine is a vast improvement on its predecessor, not to mention future-proofed for BS6 emissions. The updated infotainment brings it up to the cutting edge, and incredibly it seems to be a touch more comfortable too. At a price that isn't wildly higher than before, the updates haven't even come at a huge premium. Just as the C-Class was starting to lose its shine then, they've brought it right back up to date.
Greetings from this grassy, muddy, messy field in the middle of the monsoon, and this lovely picnic table that's coming out of the back of an SUV. Now ordinarily, we wouldn't use this kind of setting for a shoot, but this is a Range Rover, and somehow it just feels apt. Now, I say Range Rover, and that can be a little bit confusing because Range Rover is the name of a brand that makes a number of SUVs. The Evoque, the Velar, the Sport, but this one is just called Range Rover. It has no suffix, and that means it's the flagship, the big daddy of the range. But actually it does have a suffix, L. Yes, this is the long wheelbase or limousine version of the Range Rover, and that means I'm going to start this review from the back seat. Now, isn't this just the life? I'm sat in the back of this long wheelbase Range Rover. I've got acres of legroom, more than I'll ever need. And this is such a huge cabin, not just with the massive windows that offer me a great view out, but with this massive panoramic sunroof that lets in so much of this unsightly weather today. Now I should tell you right at the start that this is not the maximum spec that you can get this back seat in. Oh no, if you opt for the SV Autobiography version, you'll get 2 individual seats that slide and recline and massage you, and you get this massive central console running between them. But no, this one's not too shabby either. It's the bench seat option, so you can fit a third person if you want to, but if you don't, there is this big central armrest that has cup holders and even the remote control for the entertainment screens. Quite handy.
And it also still has a reclining backrest, so that makes it quite comfy. And I assure you, this is still one of the plushest seats you can find. Now, as is befitting a car of this size, price and stature, it comes with air suspension at all four corners. It's also riding on 21-inch wheels. But I have to say, despite that, the ride is absolutely superb. It's got this lovely, plush, luxurious feel. There's no hint of sportiness or firmness in this at all. But while I could sit here all day, this is Autocar after all, and I do have to tell you how the big Range Rover drives. So I think it's about time I abandon this luxurious seat and head to the driver's seat. On the way to the front though, let's quickly take a look at some of the details on this behemoth. What really makes the long wheelbase version stand out is its size. At 5.2 meters long, it has a gargantuan footprint on the road and a presence to match. And if you lift the air suspension to its maximum height, you leave most hatchbacks and sedans well below window level. The only downside is that with the height comes a step up into the cabin, which might be a bit awkward at a fancy cocktail party. So imposing is the size of the thing, most might miss the few changes that came with the facelift. Slightly different bumpers, new wheel designs including these tremendous 21-inchers, and sharper headlamp graphics with optional pixel LED beam elements. And with that, it's off to take the wheel. There's just no escaping the size of this car. Yes, the steering is nice and light, and that makes it easy to maneuver this massive bulk around. But you're always aware of how much car extends behind you. These big mirrors thankfully give you a good view behind. You do get used to it in time, but you will still find yourself checking your mirrors a lot more often than you would in any other car. And now let's talk about the handling. And well, is that even a question? It handles like you think it handles. It's very soft, it's very wallowy, and you really wouldn't even attempt to push this thing hard around a corner. Just don't even try it. Now you can have the Range Rover with one of 4 engines. At the top of the heap sits the 5-litre supercharged petrol V8. Below that is the diesel V8, and there's also a supercharged V6 petrol. But the one I'm driving is the base engine, it's the V6 turbo diesel. But don't be put off by that, it still packs some pretty healthy numbers. And certainly in everyday driving, pottering around town and things like that, you'll feel no shortage of power from this V6. There are situations, however, where you wish that you'd opted for one of the bigger, more powerful engines, such as when you're overtaking out of the highway at high speeds, or, God forbid, you want to drive this car in anger. This being the top dog Range Rover, there is of course beautiful leather all over the place in huge swathes. Whether it's the dashboard, the doors, the steering wheel, it all feels soft and really nice. There's also huge slabs of wood veneer like here on the central console, bits on the dash and even on the door pads. And there's loads of brushed aluminium all over the place that feels really nice and cool to the touch. But all that was to be expected in a Range Rover. What's new are some of the more modern touches. For instance, the window switches, which are as ever placed on top of the windowsill, are now this lovely brushed aluminium effect. As before, you have digital dials, but they are a lot crisper and have a number of configurable options inside. But the biggest change is of course the adoption of In Control Touch Pro Duo from the Range Rover Velar. It is the new dual screen system with your regular touchscreen at the top. It has a nice feature that lets you tilt it towards you to avoid glare and make it more reachable. It's the lower screen that's a bit more interesting. You see, it operates the climate control, the seat, heating and ventilation, and the drive modes. It's not all touch though. You do get these 2 physical dials that are contextual once again and let you change things like the temperature and the blower speed, which means you can perform a few basic functions without taking your eyes off the road.
The equipment additions do wonders to alleviate the sense of modernity in the Range Rover, which before this felt a little behind the times. However, the one thing we wish they added with this comprehensive update is Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, neither of which are part of the package. But the best thing about a Range Rover is that should the mood take you, you can just leave the tarmac and drive wherever you want. Now, admittedly, this is not a proper off-road course or anything remotely challenging, but the thing is, this car has world-renowned off-roading capabilities, and the amount of confidence it gives you just to plow over anything is unparalleled really in this sort of segment. Even with its long wheelbase, it's capable of a lot more than what I'm throwing at it right now. And let's just say, in any other luxury SUV, I'd have probably thought twice before proceeding ahead, even on this course. In this one, I didn't bat an eyelid. All Range Rovers are on the expensive side, and though this car doesn't have any direct rivals, it still feels a little steep for what it is. Its price ranges from a not inexpensive 1.87 crore rupees all the way to a Bentley Bentayga rivaling 3.88 crore rupees. The updates with the facelift help it feel a bit more modern and more luxurious too. Let's face it, despite sharing its name with the rest of the model range, the Range Rover really sits above it, in a rarefied class of its own. And while it can take you just about anywhere, with its price, size, space and luxury, it's more about making sure you've arrived.
I'm here at the Monterey Motorsports reunion at Laguna Seca. It's a beautiful day, sunny California, and the atmosphere is just fantastic over here. Lots of classic racing cars, in fact some really fantastic historic stuff. Formula One cars, you've got Le Mans winning cars, and what's special this year is that Gulf and Ford have decided to come together after a 50-year partnership to launch this, a very special Heritage Edition. This is the Ford GT in Gulf livery. Only 50 of them are going to be made for 2 years, 2019 and 2020. That's 50 for each year. And the price, they've not announced it, but it's going to be upwards of $500,000 a pop. Now that's a lot of money, but Heritage really sells over here, and there's lots of money here as we can see. And this car looks absolutely stunning in the Gulf livery, possibly the most iconic racing livery of all time. In fact, from what we understand, Gulf have actually patented these colors. So you've got the light blue and orange accents everywhere, and even brake calipers have got that lovely shade of orange. I've driven the Ford GT earlier, but right now I'm off for a ride in the Heritage Edition around this iconic racetrack. This historic weekend at Laguna Seca is just one of a series of events that makes up the Monterey Car Week. It's the most happening event in the car world and shows America at its car crazy best. And that car craziness is off the scale at a parade of supercars on Cannery Row. Every car you've dreamt of or lusted after is here. There were more Koenigsegg's here than I've seen in my entire life. Exotics like Paganis, Bugattis, they're all here. Porsches and Lamborghinis, they're as common as a Honda here and have to be painted a bright color to vie for attention. There was no such problem for the Gulf liveried Ford GT, which always grabbed eyeballs wherever it went. But the most prestigious event is the Concours d'Elegance, held on the Pebble Beach Golf Course. It's the most famous beauty contest for heritage cars, and you're surrounded by automotive masterpieces across generations. But what blew my mind is that there was no security, no barricades, no cordons, because over here, no one touches a car. That's the respect, that's the kind of enthusiast you get in this part of the world. There was a slice of India on the Pebble Beach greens with entries from 11 Indian collectors. Their level of restoration was absolutely world class and many of them walked away with prizes. And of course, given our history and legacy, it was only fitting that the Indian entries walked away with the motor cars of the Raj class. And the best car of the show was this stunningly beautiful 1937 Alfa Romeo 8C with a touring Berlinetta body. What's unique about Pebble Beach is that it's the only show where cars from the past, present and even future are on display. The concept car launch showcases future concepts and one-offs from global manufacturers. And yes, once again, the Heritage Edition Gulf 4 GT made its way here. There's a plethora of stunning cars like the Lamborghini Aventador SVJ, the Rolls-Royce Cullinan, the Hennessy Venom F5, the McLaren 600 LT and the Volvo Polestar 1. So if you're a car nut, Pebble Beach has to be on your bucket list. It's here that the biggest and maddest car nuts hang out every year. As for myself, I'm really kicking myself for not coming here sooner.